On behalf of the Iranian Solidarity Group, I'd like to welcome all of you to the Solidarity Evening with Women, Life, Freedom Movement and the Iranian community of Aotearoa, New Zealand. Also, a warm welcome to our dear MPs from Labour, Green and National parties, their Excellencies Ambassadors of the Netherlands and Ireland, as well as the Charge d'Affaires of the EU delegation, and South Africa, the representatives from MFAT, Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet, NZ Police, Multicultural New Zealand, UNESCO New Zealand, Amnesty International, Ukrainian, Gramada Wellington, and Hutt Valley Irish Society from the Iranian community of Wellington and New Zealand. Your presence tonight is really heartwarming and highly appreciated. We have organized this event mainly for two reasons. First, providing space for the Iranian community of Aotearoa New Zealand to meet their representatives and ambassadors, officials, and diplomats in order to get to know one another better and talk about their hopes and aspirations. Secondly, raising further awareness about the Women, Life, Freedom movement. To those attending and our Parliament representatives in New Zealand, and invite more MPs to support this movement in joining the formation of a Solidarity Parliamentary Friendship Group to help us stand in solidarity with us, support us in pushing our future action plans. Women, Life, Freedom movement is a progressive and powerful movement, started nearly 8 months ago in Iran, after the killing of Mahsa Amini at the custody of morality police. A little bit elaboration on morality police. This is a force specially shaped to scan women on the streets in Iran for their outfits, to arrest them, humiliate them if they find or decide that they're not wearing their hijab properly. In my personal opinion, this is the badge of the gender apartheid taking place in Iran. Anyhow, the heartbreaking story of Mahsa Amini became the spark of nationwide uprisings and protests with the symbol of woman, life, freedom, which is our slogan as well. And to be honest, it summarizes all what we're fighting for. That's all what we want: equality, prosperity, dignity, and liberty. Achieving such goal and dream, however, is not easy. Iranians are fighting a very hard battle. They're fighting a very corrupt, resourceful, playful, and brutal regime. They're fighting its fully militarized, armed, the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. The organization that Iranians around the world have been unitedly shouting for its designation as a terrorist organization. The organization that all non-government political parties of New Zealand have demanded officially for its designation as a terrorist organization. An organization that there is piling evidence that is a terrorist organization, yet democracies around the world are hesitant, are taking baby steps, are not taking any steps. So we hope that changes. The regime plays everyone, people inside the country, the opposition overseas, the countries in the region, democracies around the world, not always successfully, but tirelessly and consistently. To win over such a system, we need to stay focused, persistent, truthful, and powerful. While we know that the change should and will happen at our hands, we need the support of democracies around the world and the public opinion around the globe. They need to rise up to their values, empower people whose rights are violated, who are determined to bring about the change, and limit the power of this human rights offender regime. The day we win this battle, Iranians will be free, the region will be safer, and the world will have one major problem less to deal with. That is all what we're asking for. Please adjust to this long-term lens. While we're hesitant, the regime inside Iran is continuing to violate human rights. They're killing our young generation, our beautiful generation. They hang them. They're looking for necks for their hanging ropes. We need to change that. Everybody needs to do their bits. These small bits joining together will be very powerful and effective. We hope New Zealand becomes one of the pioneering democracies to support Iranians. And we hope and we believe that that will be achieved if more MPs join us and support us. Tonight we have music, dance, and a photo exhibition, and some refreshments. This is how we want to represent Iran, through its art and its culture, not through the act of terror. That is not who we are. We are just being represented by a minority that has the power. That is not who we are, and we want the world to see that. Our first dance performance is a Baluchi dance. The Baluch people settled in Balochistan centuries ago. Iran's Baluch population, a population of 2 million, are among the most deprived ethnic groups and are often neglected. The depth of this neglection reaches to having limited access to clean water, and some not even registered as Iranians, no ID, no identity. Despite of all these discriminations, they're very warm, welcoming people and express themselves through dance and music. Our friend Bahar tonight is dedicating a Baluchi dance to Khodanullah Jayi, who was among the very first lives were lost during the uprising. Please join me in welcoming her. She's dedicating this dance to Khodanullah. to invite MP Vanushi Walters to share her thoughts on Women, Life, Freedom movement and elaborate on her motivations for supporting this movement. Before that, on behalf of the community and Iranian Solidarity Group, I'd like to thank you for sponsoring this event and providing us with this space. Really deeply appreciate it. Please join me in welcoming her.
Tēnā koutou katoa and kia ora. Welcome to Parliament, welcome to your house. This is a place where your voices matter, this is a place where words matter, this is a place where advocacy matters. So please all stand for a moment and together, stand up. Women, life, freedom from your bones. Women, life, freedom, everyone. Women, life, freedom! Thank you. Thank you. I want to make a few acknowledgements as I begin this evening, and the first is to Golriz Ghahraman, my very long-term friend, but also parliamentary colleague. And I want to acknowledge you first, because for you, I know this isn't just about advocacy. It's not just about human rights, it's personal. And as a Sri Lankan who has witnessed my home country's people go through human rights abuses and not being there to support on the streets, I know what that feels like. I also know how powerful it is to feel almost a murmuration of people on the streets, and to see that, to see the ask for democracy, and to know that you have a calling here to highlight that. So I am astounded by the work you do in this space, and I just wanted to recognise that first. I also wanted to thank our other co-hosts, the Honourable Phil Twyford and Ibrahim Omar, who is my co-chair on Ethnic Caucus, both tireless advocates for human rights in the House. We have other MPs with us here as well, so could I just ask all our MPs to stand in the room? We have from the National Party and Camilla Village, also from Labour. And I ask them to stand because you absolutely have advocacy on these issues in the House. This is not a movement fermented in the West. I think what has been powerful for me is to see that this is something that has come out of the voices of Iranian activists. And I think that's extremely powerful to see. And so my final acknowledgement will really be to Ada, to Forough, to the Women's Network, who've been doing this hard work in New Zealand to raise these issues with us. I think there's something that advocates and activists share, and it's the collision of outrage and hope. I think many of us have felt that, but what it almost manifests in is a sense of grit, I think, and that's what I admire of the work that you're doing out there every day. We see it in the streets of New Zealand in parallel to what we're seeing on the streets of Iran. What I would say from us is that as you do your work, because this is rooted in Iranian advocacy, but you also have allies in us in the House. Very recently, Simon and I travelled to Bahrain, where we went on an interparliamentary union delegation. Other delegates from around the world attend these events as well. Now, when I travelled to Bahrain, I arrived on my own, separate from the other delegates who had arrived earlier. And I got off the plane and they put me in this little room where you wait to be processed, and other delegations come in. And I was at the centre of a grouping of empty seats. The next delegation came and sat around me, and it was the Iranian delegation. It was not my first interaction with the Iranian delegation, but I can tell you this: if you've ever wondered how the Iranian government feels about New Zealand, about the travel bans we've put in place, about the sanctions attached to their assistance with Russia, about the minister's very firm statements, they feel cold, they feel angry. It is palpable when you're sitting right next to them. I introduced myself as New Zealand and began what I hoped would be a conversation about human rights. And it was a very complex, difficult, cold conversation. Our views are absolutely felt by the Iranian government. It was not my last interaction with the Iranian government during the IPU. It was day one. Day two, they came to the Asia Pacific Forum, and they're counted as the Asia Pacific grouping, and the Iranians stood up a young man for the candidacy for the youth rep on the governance body against a Tuvaluan candidate. And as soon as it was announced, I could see that there was alarm with other candidates in the room. Your allies huddled. I looked up to see that that Australian delegates, British delegates, Canadian delegates were all walking very quickly across the floor, and we huddled. And the idea was that we would hit them with a barrage of questions inside the room and outside the room. And I'd like to read mine. I stood and gave the first question, and I said, "Gender equality and women's rights are a touchstone issue of our time. This is an issue that has captured the hearts of young people around the world and has been a key issue of concern for the IPU. What we know is that it often takes a critical mass of women's voices to effect change. I'd like to ask the delegate to speak about their view of gender equality and women's rights to raise their voices and actively seek respect for their human rights." Now that day, I wasn't wearing my Women Life Freedom t-shirt, but I think they got the message. South Korea leant over as I asked the question and said, "Well done. Let me know if you need anything from South Korea." And then Canada absolutely went for it with a string of accurate accusations. You have allies. We are filled with a sense of outrage, but we are also filled with a sense of hope, and we are in awe of your grit. We'll continue to raise the issues that you raise with us here in the House, in communities, and in the international forums we sit in. We stand in solidarity with you. Women, life, freedom. Kia kaha.
Thank you very much, dear Vanushi. Please continue hitting them with those hard questions. Next, I'd like to invite our dear Golriz, who stood behind us from the first event we organized in Wellington, who cut her hair alongside ourselves, who hasn't stopped ever since, who's our sister, who shares the same hopes, who's advocating for us. And just I wanted to let you know, we highly appreciate your support, your advocacy, and we highly value you. Please join me.
با درود به هموطنان عزیزم، مخصوصاً به زنان ایرانی، هم اینجا هم در وطنمون ایران. قلب ما هممون هر روز، هر لحظه در ایران. من میدونم ما دوریم از وطن، ولی خونی که توی رگای ما ایرانیه. I know that we, all of us, Iranians across the globe, feel every moment the pain, the suffering, and the absolute excitement that comes with knowing that Iran might be free in our lifetime. We are all, every single one of us, in Iran or in Forough, as we would say, across the globe, victims of that regime, unless we work for them. Otherwise, we are far away from our family, our loved ones, our language, our homelands, because of the violence of that regime. And that's just those of us like me who moved as a child. I know that anyone who moved as an adult saw that violence in a very real way. I know the anxiety of having a strong, ambitious mother in her 20s leaving the house to go to university and checking her hijab in that first decade of this regime. Because if you didn't do it quite right, the unthinkable could happen. That's terror. It's not just violence. The aim of this regime is to terrorize Iranians into compliance. It's to control that population, to control our national wealth, through control of our very bodies. The definition of terror is violence with the intent to control a civilian population. We want to know that when New Zealand sanctions Iran, individual leaders who are hurting our people, that it's for us, not for Ukraine only. That is why we need our government to stand with us to designate the Revolutionary Guard, who is out there killing our young people, a terrorist organisation, because they are a terrorist organisation. We want you to say gender apartheid. We want you to say women, life, freedom, to ask those questions at the United Nations. Vanushi, that's so beautiful that you took that space for us when you could. But maybe I'm just being too much of a lawyer. I need them to be legally wrong. We need that on the record. We need their funding mechanisms, their family wealth. We need to hit them where it hurts because they are terrorists. It's a vague word, but it's rape, it's physical assault, it's murder, it's theft, and it's all been done to control us through our very bodies, if you're a woman in Iran. I just want to acknowledge our minorities too in Iran. The indigenous Baluch population, the Baha'is, the Kurds, we're all under threat in different ways. Women in Iran are leading right now. It is their revolution. A population, a generation who has never seen freedom. When I first ran for Parliament, I'd go to meetings and I'd say, whatever I said something about my background and how I was a lawyer, a human rights lawyer, and someone would inevitably say, how can we help other immigrants to assimilate like you? And I'd always say, what do you mean? And they'd go, well, you know, you're educated, you're a feminist, you're independent, and I'd say, I learned feminism from women who faced tanks for equality. This is our value. And apart from being feminists, deep in our core, we are dancers, and we are great cooks, and we are scientists, and poets, and writers. This is happening to people just like you, anywhere in the world, and we deserve so much better. Those kids back in Iran, I can say that now, I'm old enough, they're going to win us all our freedom, which is why we stand together, and we will keep standing together. As Kiwis, as Iranians, as refugees, as diplomats, as political advisors, as journalists, on the right side of history for women, life, freedom. Zan, zindagi, azadi.
Thank you so much, Golriz. Before I introduce our last speaker, I just want to make a short point actually at our young generation inside just wants to point out how brave, liberated, powerful, and unbreakable they are. We, first 2 generations after the revolution, we were, as Golriz said, terrorized. These new generations, they are not. They are our hope, they inspire us, and we are so incredibly proud of them and are counting on them. And they should count on us. That's why we will continue doing what we do. I'd like to introduce our last speaker. We don't want to bore you with speeches, but these are important issues we would like you to hear about. Dear Dr. Forough Amin, the founder of Iranian Women in New Zealand, who's been tirelessly from the beginning of this movement advocating for it in New Zealand. She's going to share with us what practical steps actually can be taken here. Please join me in welcoming her.
Kia ora, everyone. I'm not sure if you have heard a poem called Home by the British Somali poet Warsan Shire. The poem starts with, "No one leaves home unless home is the mouth of a shark." The first time when I heard this poem, it touched me deeply, and I thought the way the poet is describing the refugees fleeing their homelands is very much similar to the situation of women going to the streets protesting against the gender apartheid regime like the Islamic Republic. And today in the morning, I made a version of that poem for Mohammad Hosseini. He was a young man who didn't have any family or relatives. But when he was executed, an entire nation grieved for him. No one leaves home and rushes into streets with their fists waving in the air, unless that's the last resort. No one faces bullets and guns with open arms, unless nothing more has left to lose. You have to understand that no one risks their lives standing face to face with brutal armed forces, unless life is as devastating as death. No one chooses prison over freedom, unless the street suffocates them as much as the prison does. Tonight we have come together here with a shared awareness of the situation in Iran. Innocent young people being killed, executed, blinded, and raped. We have all expressed our condemnations and deep concerns, so I'm not going to elaborate on these matters tonight. Neither am I going to discuss the inadequate response from the international community, or how the democratic states failed millions of Iranian women who are bravely fighting against a gender apartheid regime. Instead, I wish to bring to our attention a larger and more concerning issue, the root cause of this failure. Why does the international community often compromise with authoritarian regimes? Why are the so-called democratic states unable to adequately and proportionately address violations of human rights by dictators and oppressive regimes? I believe the answer to this question lies in the dominance of realism in international relations, and the way key principles like diplomacy, negotiation, dialogue, and security are being interpreted. In the international arena, we often hear these concepts being described as pathway to peace or symbols of cooperation. However, the reality we face is quite different. These seemingly noble concepts have ironically become stumbling blocks in the way of promoting human rights. For the sake of opening or keeping diplomatic doors open, we are shutting down doors to democracy and change for millions of people. Let me be clear. For me, diplomacy is not a sacred concept. It is between the states, and also balancing the power relation between the states. It has nothing to do with people and their human rights and human security. Realism in international relations insists on maintaining dialogue with all states, no matter what their human rights records are. This approach that focuses on strategic interests has resulted in a tolerance for human rights abuses and also legitimization of these oppressive regimes. Regimes with catastrophic human rights records are aware of this tolerance. And that's why, for example, the Islamic Republic regime has no fear from the international community. That's why the Islamic Republic takes democratic countries and their people hostages on a daily basis. We saw just 2 days ago the shameful prisoner swap between the regime and Belgium. They swapped a terrorist with an aid worker. Islamic Republic knows no matter what it does, other countries are not going to cut ties with it. They are not going to expel its ambassadors. Why? Because we should keep the doors to the diplomacy open at any cost, at the cost of millions of people suffering. Ladies and gentlemen, we are trapped by diplomacy and security. As long as we prioritize engagement, stability, and strategic interests over ethics and moral responsibilities. Realism in international relations emphasizes on maintaining engagement with the hope of inducing some changes in the behavior of this oppressive regime, like Islamic Republic. But it is a mere fantasy and truly unrealistic. Nothing has changed in the behavior of this regime for the better in the last 44 years. It has only worsened. The entire international system is a mockery of justice and human rights. It is a joke to me. Take the Islamic Republic becoming the chair of the UN Human Rights Council Social Forum as an example. The regime is under investigation in the UN Human Rights Council for its crimes against its own people. And then it is selected by the same council to run a forum on the role of technology in the promotion of human rights in the context of COVID-19. The very same regime that banned the importation of vaccines from Europe and US and left thousands of its own people to die is gonna chair this forum in November this year. As much as it is promising, the other example is feminist foreign policy being pursued by a number of countries, including our country, New Zealand. As much as it is promising, and I love it, but we can see how it is trapped in an international environment heavily dominated by realism. A country with a feminist foreign policy should actively work to protect and promote women's rights globally. Otherwise, what is the difference between a country with a feminist foreign policy and the one leading towards realism in its foreign policy? Once, I asked Minister Nanaya Mahuta, what is the point of pursuing a feminist foreign policy if we are unable to genuinely stand by women like Iranian women who are fighting against the gender apartheid regime? Isn't it the core essence of having a feminist perspective to support women who are systematically marginalized and oppressed? Especially when these women are standing for themselves and the only thing they want from you is to stop supporting the regime that they are fighting against. Why do these states, including New Zealand, fail to go beyond some statements of travel bans? New Zealand has a reputation for democracy and taking initiatives when it comes to women's rights. Why not work along the same lines and advocate for removing the Islamic Republic from chairing Human Rights Social Forum and even more importantly, to expand the international criminal law to include gender hierarchies in addition to racial hierarchies in the definition of apartheid. The systematic and institutionalized nature of apartheid resonates with gender hierarchies that marginalize and oppress individuals based on their gender identities. To conclude, I firmly believe that New Zealand, with its long-standing commitment to human rights and gender equality, has a crucial role to play in this advocacy effort. By championing this cause, New Zealand can stand by women of Iran and also women of Afghanistan who are globally campaigning against gender apartheid regimes in their country. Woman life, freedom. Thank you.
Thank you so much, dear Forough. I can feel your passion. We share the same passion, and I really hope that you felt it too. I just want to add one little point. Realism politics is not in contrary with what we're asking for. It is realistic. It's just not through a short-term lens. Please hear us out. Look at the matter through a long-term lens. If the changes we're asking for happen, we will have a very strong ally in the region that can be the anchoring hope for all the other countries facing the same trouble. We are willing to do the work. We need support. A nation wants the change, is paying a heavy price for it. And believe me, the change will happen. Let the history remember you. Let the history remember you by standing by our side and empowering us. The beautiful, lovely and professional band playing for us tonight is called Public Voice. Tonight, next to politics, as I mentioned, we want to talk about our artists and to tell you how art and politics and everything else inside Iran are intertwined. Public Voice, a progressive rock band formed by Reza and Bahman Khalili in 1997. Originating from Iran, Public Voice was the first rock band that performed a rock concert after the 1979 revolution. It became very popular and gained lots of fans as they toured throughout Iran. And obviously, they were confronted by the regime as they're against happiness, as they're against people being happy, and just because they had political lyrics. Khalili brothers were poisoned, accused of using drugs, accused of spying for Israel, and promoting Western culture, and were jailed just because of playing rock music and writing political songs. Eventually, they were banned indefinitely from any kind of art or music activities. Reza and Bahman fled Iran and continued making and playing rock and blues music in Turkey, Azerbaijan, and Malaysia, where they sought refuge, and eventually New Zealand invited them to live in Ottawa. They arrived here in March 2021. We have Reza Khalili, who's going to sing for us and play guitar. We have Bahman Khalili, who's playing drums. We have Hamid playing keyboard, and we have Henry playing guitar bass.
Thank you so much for coming everyone here for trying to support Iran. We played a song by the Shahriar Hamari, the songwriter in Iran, and the song they called Forbidden. This song was he wrote after the revolution and talked about the Iran freedom and everything is in Forbidden, and we cannot do anything under that regime of government.
چشم تو را هیچ از ازل
I want to thank you, dear Bahara, from the bottom of my heart, which is beating so violently right now, because that is what we're experiencing. Absolutely. Art is powerful, really powerful. Thanks to all the artists tonight helping us. I can see some teary eyes. Sorry, I need a second. I'd like to thank dear Ehsan Hazaveh, who's among us, one of the founder members of Iranian Solidarity Group, and an award-winning photographer who also joined us, took those beautiful, powerful photos, and used his specialty, which is storytelling through photography. I'd like to invite you all to some refreshment. There is a Persian finger food at the table. Please help yourself. Please go through Ehsan's photos. Read the captions to get further understanding of our emotions and aspirations, and what happened inside Iran and what's happening inside Iran.